It was supposed to be a quiet Saturday afternoon. My daughter, just 5 years old, was giggling under the string lights at the HOA's annual neighborhood potluck, holding her little yellow cup of lemonade with both hands like it was a trophy. Her curly hair was tied back in a pink bow, her favorite one, and her eyes sparkled with the kind of innocence this world barely deserves. For a moment, I remember thinking maybe, just maybe, this neighborhood was finally learning to accept her. That despite the whispered comments, the fake smiles, the concerned letters taped to our door, we might get through this day without drama. I was wrong, because within minutes of sipping that lemonade, she dropped the cup. Her hands began to shake, her knees gave out, and in front of 24 HOA members and neighbors, she collapsed. At first, there was confusion. Someone called out, "Is she okay?" Others froze. Karen Richards, the HOA president, gasped with the kind of concern that only guilt knows how to fake. I rushed to my daughter's side, screaming her name, checking her pulse, lifting her limp body into my arms as her lips quivered and her eyes fluttered shut. Someone shouted to call 911. I didn't wait. I ran through that perfectly landscaped yard, through stunned silence and artificial lawns, straight to my car, heart pounding harder than it ever had in a courtroom. My hands were trembling as I buckled her in, my thoughts racing faster than my wheels. What happened? Was it an allergy? A seizure? Was it something she ate? But nothing prepared me for what the doctors told me hours later in the ER. Benzodiazepine, a sedative, mixed in her system. No, not a trace from a prescription, deliberately ingested. Someone had tampered with her drink. Someone had drugged my 5-year-old daughter at a neighborhood potluck. And as I sat there in that cold hospital room, watching her sleep under a sea of beeping monitors, something in me broke. And then it burned. She just wanted lemonade. But someone wanted to teach us a lesson. They wanted to make a statement. They wanted to silence a little girl who never did anything but smile too loudly, laugh too freely, live too beautifully. And they thought they could get away with it. What Karen didn't know, what she never even bothered to ask, was that the little girl she tried to poison was the daughter of the district attorney. And that night, I stopped being just a neighbor. I became the prosecutor she'd never forget. Before that day, at the hospital, before the lemonade, before the headlines, I was just a father trying to build a peaceful life for his daughter. My name is Daniel Carter, and for the past 13 years, I've served as a district attorney. I've prosecuted some of the most vicious criminals in the state. I've stood in courtrooms across from killers, traffickers, and predators. But nothing, not a single case, ever shook me like the betrayal that came from the place I thought was safest, our neighborhood. After my wife passed away from a rare autoimmune condition 3 years ago, I promised our daughter, Ava, that I'd give her a life full of warmth, laughter, and security. She was just 2 then, barely able to speak, still clinging to the corner of my shirt as she explored the world with wide, fearless eyes. But life had more battles lined up. By age 3, Ava was diagnosed with a rare neurological disorder that impacted her motor control. She learned to walk late, speak slower than most kids her age, and was under constant therapy. But through every hurdle, she remained gentle, bright, radiant. Ava was the kind of child who picked flowers for strangers and whispered, "I love you," to trees. She saw the beauty in things most of us ignored. And I saw God's grace in her every day. So when I accepted a major career promotion, I made the decision to move us into what everyone called the perfect place to raise a family. Willow Creek Estates, a gated community, a park on every corner, a glistening HOA promise of safety, order, and beauty. It was the kind of neighborhood brochures brag about, where flags hang evenly, lawns are always mowed in stripes, and residents wave politely before disappearing behind tinted glass. I was hopeful. The neighbors smiled when we moved in. Ava drew chalk hearts on the driveway that read, "Hi, I'm Ava." The house felt too quiet without my wife's laugh echoing off the walls, but we were healing slowly. That was until the letters began. The first one came a week after Ava waved at a woman across the street and accidentally rolled a few inches of her wheelchair onto the sidewalk. "Please keep your child's equipment off the shared path." It read in neatly typed font and signed but clearly meant for us. I crumpled it, told myself it was a one-off. But more followed. Children's toys must be stored out of public view. No sidewalk chalk violates property presentation policy. Unapproved ramp extension notice. Then came the fines. First $25, then $100. Then a formal citation for non-compliant front yard aesthetics because Ava's wind chimes, crafted in therapy with glitter and bottle caps, hung from a tree branch near our porch. I began to ask around. Who was filing these? Who decided what was unsightly or acceptable? And that's when I was formally introduced to Karen Richards, president of the HOA, self-appointed queen of conformity, 62 years old, always in beige slacks, always gripping a binder like it held the secrets to the universe. Karen wasn't just a stickler for rules, she was the rules. She quoted HOA codes like scripture, carried a measuring tape in her purse, and had a passive-aggressive smile that could curdle milk. At first, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I even attended a few HOA meetings, thinking we could reason with her. But she didn't want conversation. She wanted control. "I understand your daughter has special needs," she said to me once, with the kind of tone people use when they're trying to sound kind, but are actually being cruel. But the community still has standards. Standards? What standard did Ava violate by planting sunflowers near our walkway? What guidelines said her giggle during her scooter rides was too loud for residential zones? What clause justified Karen warning our babysitter that letting Ava ride her tricycle down our short driveway was an insurance liability? But it wasn't just about rules. Karen had a way of weaponizing normalcy, of turning basic neighborly behavior into moral violations. She began to rally others around her mission. Other board members started showing up near our house with clipboards. One neighbor admitted they were told that Ava's presence might reduce property values due to her visible disability equipment. At first, I tried to rise above it. I coached Ava to ignore the stares. I adjusted our routines. We moved her garden to the backyard. We replaced her wind chimes with plastic ones shaped like birds. Less jarring, they said, but I started to notice something worse than the cruelty. Ava noticed too. She began asking why people didn't say hello anymore, why other kids stopped inviting her to birthday parties, why her pictures on the community board disappeared the week after Karen visited the clubhouse. She was 5, but kids feel what adults don't say. They sense exclusion like cold wind through a cracked window. And no matter how much I hugged her, no matter how many bedtime stories I read, there's no way to explain to a child why someone would hate her simply for being different. And then came the day of the spring event, the HOA potluck. Ava had spent weeks making cupcakes with Natalie, our friend and caretaker. She even made her own lemonade stand sign, decorated with glittery letters. Lemonade by Ava, smiles are free. She wanted to give back, to be part of something. I almost didn't let her go. Something in me hesitated. But I told myself, you're being paranoid. It's just lemonade. We arrived at the event. Karen gave a tight-lipped smile and ignored Ava completely, but she greeted every other child by name. I saw it. Ava saw it. But she smiled anyway. She always smiled, always gave more than she received. I watched her wheel her little table into place. I helped her pour the first few cups. And then, at some point, I stepped away to speak with a neighbor who wanted to ask me something about a local ordinance. I was gone 5 minutes. 5 minutes. When I returned, Ava was sipping from her own cup, eyes a little glazed. 10 minutes later, she collapsed, and that's when the setup ended. That's when the courtroom in my mind opened its doors. That's when Karen's HOA binder became evidence, and my daughter's pain became Exhibit A. It started slowly, like a steady drip in a silent room. Not loud enough to scream danger, but consistent enough to keep you awake at night. The first real crack came on Ava's birthday. She was turning 5, a milestone that felt like a miracle considering everything she had fought through in therapy and hospitals. Natalie and I spent days preparing. We didn't want anything too big, just some balloons, a backyard banner, cupcakes, a few classmates from her preschool, and a table where Ava could give out her handmade butterfly cards. She had been practicing her lines for days. Thank you for coming to my birthday. And for the first time in months, she seemed to believe she belonged here. We had even filled out the required HOA event form weeks in advance, a sad but necessary ritual to throw a party in your own backyard. No loud music, no outside vendors, just kids, crayons, and cupcakes. But 2 days before the party, an HOA board email went out, thinly veiled as a general community update. It read, residents are reminded that private events must comply with the community aesthetics policy. No outdoor signage, no amplified noise, no plastic decor visible from the street. Our neighborhood is not a carnival. The timing wasn't coincidence. Everyone knew Ava's party was coming. That night, we found the chalk drawing she had made near the mailbox. Ava's birthday, this Saturday. You're invited. Scrubbed out with water. The sidewalk, still wet. No note, no explanation. But we didn't cancel. We scaled down. And still, only 4 families showed up. Some didn't even come to the door, just drove by, slowed, then turned around. Ava noticed. I saw her sit quietly in her chair after handing out just 2 butterfly cards, her little hands fidgeting, her eyes darting to the gate as if hoping someone else might still walk through. She didn't cry. That was the part that broke me. She didn't throw a fit. She just sat there and accepted it, like she was used to being left out. The next week, I attended the monthly HOA meeting. I had skipped a few before, but this time I needed answers. Karen opened the meeting with a tight agenda. Item number 3, ongoing disturbances related to nonconforming behavioral issues at community events. She didn't name Ava. She didn't have to. She talked about children with unpredictable reactions, about preserving the comfort of all residents, about families who may unintentionally attract disruptive attention. The words weren't bullets, they were needles, small, sharp, and deliberate. A man on the board nodded along. Another woman said something about insurance risks if children in mobility equipment were involved in public gatherings. I spoke up. If you have concerns about my daughter, address them directly. Karen gave a smile as thin as paper. Oh, no, Mr. Carter, we would never single out your family. We're simply reminding everyone of the importance of shared space and comfort. That night, I began to document everything. I created a folder, HOA activity. I started saving emails, photographing letters, timestamping calls. I wasn't going to accuse anyone, not yet, but the courtroom in my head was already preparing for trial. The next incident was harder to ignore. Ava's wheelchair had been parked just outside the house for 5 minutes, only 5, while Natalie helped carry some bags in from therapy. When we came back out, one of the tires was flat. Clean puncture. Not wear. Not accident. I took pictures. I didn't file a complaint yet, but I saved it. The same week, a local mom stopped replying to our Playdate texts. When Natalie followed up, she replied with an awkward message, "Hey, not sure if we're a good fit anymore. Hope all is well." 2 days later, her son's coloring project, a joint piece he'd made with Ava in class, was ripped off the school hallway board. When Natalie asked the teacher, she said the other parent requested it be removed. Ava came home confused, asking if she'd done something wrong. I said no, but she didn't believe me. The next time she wheeled past that house, she kept her head down. Then came the lemonade. Not the lemonade, not yet, but the odd pattern of small sabotage. Ava had started a habit, bringing lemonade to our weekend gatherings in the common lawn. It made her feel part of the community. She'd set up a tiny fold-out table and give away free cups with little notes that said things like, "Have a bright day." The first time, people loved it. An elderly couple even said it reminded them of simpler times. But the second week, her table was accidentally knocked over when one of the HOA board members' grandkids ran by. The third week, her cooler disappeared. It was later found near the community dumpster. Empty. The fourth week, someone left a note that read, "Children shouldn't sell drinks without a permit." We didn't confront them. Not yet. I reminded Ava that sometimes people forget how to be kind, but that didn't mean she should stop being her. She nodded, but I noticed she didn't decorate her table the next time, and that her sign was missing. She said it had blown away, but the wind wasn't blowing that day. At night, I began reviewing security footage, my own Ring camera, neighbors who agreed to help, even clubhouse cameras. I wasn't expecting to find anything big, just patterns. On 3 separate occasions, Karen walked past our driveway with a clipboard, then stopped in front of our house for at least 90 seconds watching. Just watching. Another clip showed her inspecting the wheels of Ava's scooter left near the porch. She bent down, touched something, then quickly walked away. I tried not to overthink it. Maybe it was just her being nosy. But combined with everything else, it felt like someone was keeping a scorecard against a child. Then came the incident with the dog. Ava loved dogs. She would wave and giggle at them from her chair, always asking to pet them. One day, as we sat near the fountain at the center of Willow Creek, Karen approached with her large white poodle, Maximus. Ava smiled and asked, "Can I pet him?" I was right beside her. Karen looked down with a stone face and said, "He's allergic to excessive touch. Some children make him nervous." Ava blinked, confused, and slowly lowered her hand. She whispered, "Okay." I said nothing. I just stared. And that's when Karen looked up and added, "Maybe she should be taught boundaries, Mr. Carter. Not everyone is comfortable with unpredictability." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I took Ava home, and that night after she went to bed, I opened my laptop and began compiling all my files into one long, organized document. Date, time, incident, witness, photo. I didn't know then what would come. I didn't know that things would escalate into something criminal. But I knew one thing with chilling clarity: someone had declared war on a 5-year-old girl, and they thought they could hide behind policy and HOA procedure. They thought their cruelty was subtle enough to slip under the radar. But I'd prosecuted people who used the law to harm others. I knew what systemic bullying looked like, and I knew that Karen wasn't just enforcing rules, she was creating a narrative, a world where my daughter didn't belong, and she was slowly, strategically breaking her spirit. What she didn't know is that I was already building my case, because the day she crossed the line, I'd be ready. The Willow Creek Estate's annual spring potluck was supposed to be the one event that brought everyone together. A community celebration. Lawn chairs, folding tables, potluck dishes with taped name tags. The kind of weekend gathering that HOA newsletters love to flaunt as proof of neighborhood unity. And after months of exclusion, whispered judgment, and hostility, Ava had asked me softly one night, "Daddy, can I go this time? Just to give people my lemonade?" Her eyes held no bitterness, just hope, still hope. That, more than anything, shattered me. Because despite everything Karen had done, despite the chalk being scrubbed away, her garden pots being thrown out, her friends turning cold, Ava still believed in people. She still wanted to show up. I looked her in the eye and promised, "Yes, sweetheart, you can go, and I'll be with you the whole time." We spent the morning preparing her little stand together. She colored in a fresh sign, "Sunshine Lemonade Made with Smiles." Natalie helped her pick out her favorite dress, the yellow one with soft white flowers, and curled her hair with a little ribbon on one side. She wore her medical bracelet proudly, not because she had to, but because she said, "I like the sparkle." We packed the lemonade, the cups, her cards with smiley faces on them, and we wheeled her down to the center of the green, where neighbors were already setting up tables, some with checker cloths, others with flags. I watched as people glanced our way. Some nodded politely, others looked through us like we were fog. And then Karen arrived. Karen Richards, HOA president, clipboard in one hand, reusable wine glass in the other. Her expression was unreadable, controlled. She greeted everyone in her path, complimented casseroles, laughed softly at jokes. But when her eyes landed on Ava's lemonade table, the corner of her mouth twitched. I could feel the disdain even before she spoke. She made a point to avoid us, walking a wide circle around Ava's booth. But I noticed something strange. Karen kept looking back. Not in a curious way, in a calculating way. Like she was watching a clock tick. Like she was waiting for something. We stayed for almost 2 hours. Ava was happy. She gave out more than 24 cups of lemonade, each one served with a shy smile and a paper card that read, "You are loved." Some neighbors responded warmly. Others hesitated. A few visibly avoided making eye contact, but Ava didn't seem to notice. She was in her element, and for a while I let myself breathe. I spoke with an elderly couple from the next block, accepted a plate of food, and kept Ava in my line of sight. She was drinking her own lemonade now, one of the last cups left. She was humming. And then suddenly, her cup slipped from her hand. At first, I thought she was just clumsy. It happened. Her motor control sometimes faltered, but then her whole body jolted and her head wobbled to the side. Her eyes blinked rapidly, then slowed, then stayed half open. She reached one hand out like she couldn't see straight, and then she slumped. Her little fingers twitched once, then stopped. The world went silent. Then came the scream. I don't know if it was mine or Natalie's, but the sound cut through the potluck like a blade. Guests turned. Karen dropped her glass and rushed over, but not to help. She looked down, hands over her mouth in performative shock. "Oh, my goodness, is she having an episode?" she asked, loudly enough for others to hear. Natalie knelt beside Ava, checking her pulse with shaking fingers. I was already dialing 911. My daughter's unresponsive. I told the dispatcher, "Fight and stay calm." She just collapsed. "We're at the Willow Creek HOA lawn. 5 years old. Please hurry." The next 15 minutes were a blur of motion and noise. Some guests tried to help, others just stared. A few kids cried. Karen hovered, speaking softly to nearby residents. "It must be a seizure, poor thing. I hope this doesn't scare the other children." I heard her say that, "Scare the other children," and something inside me snapped. Ava was lifted into the ambulance with Natalie by her side. I followed in my car. No sirens, just flashing lights and dread pounding in my chest like a war drum. At the hospital, time stopped moving. Doctors swarmed her. Monitors beeped. Wires were placed. Needles inserted. I stood in the hallway holding her small pink shoe in my hand, staring at it like it might give me answers. Then came the news. A nurse pulled me aside with a serious expression. "Mr. Carter, we've run some toxicology screens just to rule things out. Your daughter has benzodiazepine in her system." I blinked. "What?" "A sedative," she explained gently, "like Valium or Xanax. We're not sure how it got there. It wasn't prescribed. The levels are low, but enough to cause unconsciousness in a child her size." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Someone drugged her? She hesitated. "We can't say that definitively yet, but this wasn't an allergic reaction or random seizure. It was exposure." I stood there, staring through the window at my little girl, asleep on a white hospital bed with wires on her chest, lips dry, skin pale, and I saw everything at once. The chalk scrubbed off the sidewalk, the scooter tires slashed, the lemonade cooler thrown out, the missing cupcakes, the scribbled warnings, the wheelchair tire punctured, the kids turning cold, and now the lemonade, her cup, her drink, her joy, and Karen, her lingering glances, her performative concern, her whispering during the potluck, her need for control, her war against Ava's presence at every event. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces stopped scattering. They clicked. I remembered how she had walked behind Ava's table earlier that day, how she had leaned in when Natalie had stepped away. I remembered her saying last year, "These children, they don't belong in spaces they can't handle." She didn't want Ava gone. She wanted her silenced. That night, I returned home without Ava. She had to stay overnight for observation. Natalie stayed by her side. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and created a folder named Homicidal Negligence, Karen Richards. I copied every HOA email, printed every complaint, cross-referenced every community policy she had cited to isolate us. I rewatched the doorbell footage from every week since we moved in. I called a friend at the forensic lab, quietly asking about how long benzodiazepine lasts in the bloodstream and whether any residue might be left in a paper cup. The next morning, I visited the potluck site before sunrise. The tables had been cleared. The lawn was silent. But near the trash bin, I found Ava's paper cup, still intact, still marked with glittery marker. I slipped it into a Ziploc bag, sealed it, and labeled it for evidence. That was the moment everything changed. I was no longer just a father grieving a poisoned daughter. I was the district attorney, and I had just opened the most personal case of my life. Karen had committed the cardinal sin, not just of the law, but of humanity. She had targeted the most vulnerable person I knew. She disguised her cruelty as concern, her hatred as rules, her abuse as order. And she believed her neighborhood power protected her. But she forgot one thing. You can't outmaneuver the law when the law lives across the street. And now the investigation had officially begun. There's a switch inside every person, one you hope you'll never have to flip. For years, I'd walked the fine line between justice and restraint. In the courtroom, I'd learned to stay measured, to be fair even when staring down monsters. But that night, sitting in a hospital chair next to my 5-year-old daughter with her for beeping and her lips chapped from dehydration, that switch flipped. Something cold and primal took over, not vengeance, but clarity. I wasn't just Ava's father anymore. I was the district attorney of this county, and someone had just crossed the line from HOA harassment into criminal intent. And the person responsible had a name, a face, and the audacity to smile through her crime: Karen Richards. The evidence wasn't complete yet, but my instincts, honed by years of reading liars and power abusers hiding behind polite smiles, were screaming in harmony. I'd seen this kind of predator before, not in back alleys or dark corners, but in HOA meetings, school boards, and country club luncheons. People who wear cruelty like a perfume, subtle, sickening, and hard to wash off. They smile while cutting you, laugh while isolating you. Karen was one of them. She hadn't just targeted Ava's lemonade out of spite. She wanted her gone, silenced, and now I was done waiting for her next move. I called a few of my most trusted contacts, quietly, not through my office. Not yet. A friend from the forensics lab agreed to run tests on the lemonade cup I recovered. He owed me a favor from an old case. I didn't ask for speed, I asked for silence. I needed this airtight before I stepped out in public. Then I reviewed the potluck security footage. The community green had one mounted HOA camera for insurance purposes, and I filed a formal request under a resident safety clause. It took a few days, but I got it. I scrolled minute by minute, frame by frame. I watched Ava laughing, smiling, setting up her table. I saw myself walk away briefly to help another neighbor move a table. Then, Karen entered the frame. She approached Ava's table. Natalie had stepped away. Ava turned her head to wave at a nearby girl, and Karen placed her wine glass down on Ava's table. Her hand hovered over the cups. Then, too quickly for Ava to notice, she swapped two of them. Hers for Ava's, or maybe hers for the one she'd prepared. Then she picked up the cup that Ava would later drink from and handed it back to her with a smile. I paused the footage. My breath caught. I replayed it, over and over. There it was, on video, clear as day, premeditated, intentional, manipulative. I had my moment of confirmation, but I wasn't ready to move yet. I needed more. A motive, a confession, and witnesses. So I began reaching out, slowly, quietly. A neighbor named Rachel, who had always smiled at Ava and brought over cookies once when she was sick, responded to my invitation for coffee. We sat in the corner booth of a quiet diner. I didn't accuse. I asked, "Have you ever seen anything strange at HOA events involving Ava?" Rachel looked down at her cup for a long time, then whispered, "Karen doesn't like your daughter. She thinks she makes people uncomfortable." When I pushed gently, Rachel added, "At the potluck, I overheard Karen tell one of the board members, maybe this will scare her from coming next year." I didn't know what she meant at the time, but now her voice broke. I thanked her. asked her to write it down in her own words, no pressure. Over the next few days, I compiled statements. One neighbor saw Karen hovering behind Ava's booth, claiming she was checking the table's stability. Another remembered Karen laughing with a man named Glenn, also an HOA board member, after Ava collapsed. She said something like, "Well, now the parents will think twice about bringing her everywhere." Sick, disgusting, calculated, but legally usable. I printed everything, labeled it, organized it into a prosecutor's case folder. I now had motive, video evidence, physical evidence, pending lab results, witness statements. And I wasn't just holding it together, I was preparing to detonate it. The lab called 2 days later. Trace amounts of benzodiazepine were found on the rim of Ava's lemonade cup. Combined with the toxicology report from the ER, it matched, and the cup showed no signs of handling by Ava prior to her drinking it, meaning someone else had handled and switched it. The case was forming like concrete, and Karen had no idea. She went about her HOA duties as if nothing happened. She even filed a follow-up complaint about the unattended medical equipment that Ava had left behind on the lawn after the ambulance left. I stared at the letter for a long time before placing it into the final section of the file, pattern of behavior. On a Friday evening, I met with the sheriff in his office, just him and me. I laid the folder down in front of him. "I'm not coming to you as the DA," I said. "I'm coming to you as Ava's father, and I want to make this formal." He flipped through it, page by page. His face darkened. He asked questions. I answered them all. He watched the security footage twice. Then he closed the folder and said, "We've got enough to open an investigation and issue a warrant." The next morning, Karen Richards answered the door to find 2 officers on her porch. She smiled until she saw the clipboard and badge. "What's this about?" she asked. "This is about a felony investigation involving the suspected poisoning of a minor," one officer replied. Karen laughed nervously. "Poisoning? Are you serious?" "Yes, ma'am. We are." Her face drained. "Who's accusing me?" she demanded. "That information will be made available after formal charges are filed," the officer responded. "We're executing a warrant for any substances matching hospital records and for your personal device logs, per probable cause outlined in this affidavit." She tried to protest. She tried to guilt trip, but the officers didn't budge. This time, Karen's fear wasn't faked. I didn't show up that day. I waited. I wanted it clean, professional. But I knew the moment her front door closed behind those officers, she finally realized something. The neighborhood rules she weaponized didn't protect her anymore. Her HOA badge didn't mean anything now. She wasn't in charge of the narrative. She wasn't in control. And the little girl she tried to silence had a father who held the law in one hand and justice in the other. The next week, the charges were filed: child endangerment, attempted poisoning, and felony battery on a minor. Karen's face hit the local news. Her mugshot, her court date, her bail conditions. The community split like a crack in glass. Some were shocked. Others said they saw it coming. But no one could defend her anymore. Not after the footage. Not after the medical proof. Not after the things she'd said behind closed doors came to light. Her own board voted to suspend her. Residents began to speak out. Stories poured in. Past offenses. Fines issued to single mothers. Threats to disabled veterans. All of it buried under the shield of HOA rules. Until now. I knew the trial would come. I knew the process would be long. But the moment Karen was fingerprinted and processed, I knew justice had already begun. Not just for Ava, but for every family like mine who ever moved into a nice neighborhood and found out that cruelty wears khakis and carries clipboards. Karen wasn't just a bad neighbor. She was a case study in how power is abused quietly, how children are hurt in spaces designed to exclude them with a smile. And that's what I'd sworn to fight from the very first day I became an attorney. I didn't become the prosecutor because of ambition. I became one to stand in the gap between harm and healing, between silence and truth. And this time, that mission had come home. Karen chose the wrong little girl to hurt, and she chose the wrong father to go to war with. The HOA clubhouse had never been more crowded. Folding chairs filled every inch of the hardwood floor, and even more neighbors stood pressed against the walls and windows, murmuring, fidgeting, whispering about the urgent special meeting that had been called. Some came out of morbid curiosity, others out of quiet hope. Word had spread fast. Karen Richards, the president who once ran the HOA like a fortress, was under investigation. But what no one expected was what I was about to do next. I stood at the front of the room. No podium, no prepared statement, just a TV screen behind me and a black folder in my hand. I wasn't in a suit, just jeans and a jacket. Tonight, I wasn't standing as the district attorney. I was standing as Ava's father. The room quieted when I stepped forward. Karen sat in the front row, arms crossed, lips tight, trying to appear unbothered. Her allies, Glenn, Monica, the ones who had voted with her for years, flanked her, though they looked a little more nervous now, as if the ground they once stood on was starting to crack. I looked at her, then at the crowd, and I began with the only words that mattered. Tonight, you're going to see the truth. I clicked the remote, and the video played. Footage from the potluck. Ava at her lemonade stand. Her proud smile. Karen walking up, alone, glass in hand, the moment she swapped the cups. The moment she handed the drugged one to Ava. Gasps echoed. A few people audibly said, "Oh my God." I let it play through. No commentary, no interruptions. Then I clicked again. Screenshots of the lab report. Benzodiazepine on the cup. Ava's ER charts. Next, the witness statements. Rachel's words. The overheard comment. Maybe this will scare her from coming next year. Karen's face paled, but she stayed composed, until I turned to her and said clearly, "You drugged my 5-year-old daughter." The room froze. Karen stood. "This is absurd," she snapped. "You're twisting everything. That video doesn't prove intent. I just mixed up the cups, that's all." A few neighbors looked away. Others narrowed their eyes. Karen turned to Glenn. "You know I wouldn't do something like that, right?" Glenn didn't respond. Monica looked down at her hands. I stepped forward. The toxicology, the camera, the witnesses, the motive, the pattern of behavior, the harassment, the fines, the fear you created. You didn't just try to humiliate my daughter. You tried to poison her. You wanted her gone, and you crossed a line no neighbor, no board president, no human being should ever cross. Karen's voice cracked. "This is a setup. He's the district attorney. Of course he's going to make me the villain." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The evidence was already speaking louder than she ever had. I turned back to the crowd. "How many of you have been fined for harmless things? For sidewalk chalk? For flags? For disability ramps? For being different?" Hands began to rise. One man near the back stood and said, "She fined my wife $100 for leaving a watering can outside overnight." Another woman added, "She told me my autistic son made the playground uncomfortable." Another voice, "She made me take down my daughter's therapy swing because it was too noisy." The room erupted, not into shouting, but into release. A shared wave of truth, washing away years of silent compliance. Then came the final blow. 2 plainclothes detectives entered from the side door, officers from the sheriff's office. They approached Karen calmly, badge and papers in hand. "Ms. Richards once said, 'You're under arrest for attempted poisoning of a minor, felony endangerment, and child battery.'" She gasped, stumbling backward. "This is insane. You can't do this." I didn't mean, but her voice was drowned out by the sound of handcuffs snapping closed. The neighbors didn't cheer. They didn't boo. They just watched. Some stunned, some crying, some whispering, "Finally." Karen was escorted out through the same door she'd used so many times to hand out fines, issue warnings, and declare herself the enforcer of community standards. But tonight, she left that clubhouse in cuffs. Powerless, exposed, small. The meeting continued only briefly after that. Glenn and Monica both resigned from the HOA board on the spot. A vote was taken to suspend all standing HOA disciplinary actions for review. Another motion passed to elect a temporary ethics committee, including residents with disabled family members, to ensure no child or neighbor would ever be targeted again. I didn't stay for the rest. I walked out into the cool night, stars overhead, and got in my car. I drove straight to the hospital. Ava was awake. She sat propped up in bed, cheeks flushed, holding a small stuffed bear the nurse had given her. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Daddy," she whispered, "did you bring me more juice?" I smiled, knelt beside her, and brushed her hair back. "Not this time, sweetheart," I said, "but I brought you something better." "What?" she asked, curious. "Peace," I said softly. "Safety. The bad lady can't hurt you anymore." She tilted her head. "You mean Karen?" I blinked, surprised she remembered. "Yeah," I said, "Karen." She reached out and took my hand in her tiny one. "You're not mad anymore?" I shook my head. "No, I'm proud. You are never the problem, Ava. You are the reason I fight." She nodded slowly and said something I'll never forget. "Then I'll fight too, Daddy, but only with love." That was the moment I knew this story wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation, about a little girl who refused to be erased, about a father who wouldn't be silenced, and about a neighborhood that finally chose courage over comfort. Justice had been served. And the best part? It was only the beginning. Karen Richards faced the full weight of the law. The case went to trial 6 months later, and though she tried every legal maneuver her lawyer could think of, it was an accident, it was a misunderstanding. I have no criminal intent. The evidence was undeniable. The security footage, the toxicology report, the witness statements, the cup, the motive. The jury deliberated for just under 4 hours. She was found guilty of child endangerment, battery, and attempted poisoning of a minor. Her sentencing was swift: 5 years probation, mandatory psychiatric evaluation, and a permanent ban from holding any neighborhood or public leadership role. She avoided jail time due to a plea deal and her age, but her name was publicly etched into court records. Her power was gone. Her kingdom of fear dismantled. But the more important part of this story was never what happened to her. It's what happened afterward to Ava, to the neighborhood, to the people who had once been too afraid to speak. The HOA board was completely restructured. A new president was voted in, a young mother whose son also lived with a disability. The very first change? A community inclusion policy. It guaranteed event accessibility, outlawed biased fines, and created an anonymous reporting line for residents who felt targeted. Ava's name was written on that policy's first line, inspired by the bravery of one little girl who reminded us all what community truly means. Ava's story spread far beyond Willow Creek. National news picked it up. Online support poured in. Disability rights groups, parent communities, even educators began sharing clips of her smiling at her lemonade stand, her tiny hand gripping the yellow cup with joy before it's taken her, and then sharing the clip of her smiling again, safe, months later, back on her feet, stronger than ever. Her recovery wasn't just physical, it was emotional, and it became symbolic. A movement began. Let Her Serve became a slogan for kindness projects in over a dozen schools. Kids set up lemonade stands in her name. One little girl in Texas sent a letter that said, "I'm scared to be different at school, but Ava makes me brave." And Ava? She's okay now. Better than okay. She's thriving. She laughs louder than ever. She paints now big, bold, colorful canvases that she proudly calls dream walls. Her therapist says she's more resilient than most adults. And the last time she handed me a cup of lemonade, she said, "No one's ever going to take my joy again." I believe her. I still work as a prosecutor, still carry out justice. But something in me changed after this. Because justice isn't just about the courtroom. It's about the places we live, the neighbors we protect, the children we see or choose not to see. This wasn't just about holding one woman accountable. It was about making sure no child, no family, is ever made to feel like they don't belong, that they're too different, too noisy, too visible. Because the only thing Ava was guilty of was living with joy. And in any real community, that should be a gift, not a threat. So, if you've ever felt erased by an HOA letter, targeted for being different, silenced by rules dressed up as order, you're not alone. And your story matters. We are HOA denied access, and this is where we tell the stories they want you to forget. Stories that hurt, stories that heal, stories that change the rules. Backhand index pointing right, subscribe now if you believe in standing up for what's right, because silence protects the powerful. But truth sets people free. And sometimes it takes a 5-year-old girl with a lemonade cup to show us what justice really looks like. Lemon Yellowheart,